Imagine as a teacher or regular student, you see an incident happening at your school. Think about this. You see an autistic student misbehaving, and then minutes later you see an officer pull someone out of his hip. And he goes, Tsh! And he goes, and the autistic student goes, if you remember this incident from a day ago from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and APS officers pepper sprayed a student who has autism. Now after a day in filing public records requests, the officer was placed on leave. So what was the big deal about it? Here's John Cardinal.
Everyone has their favorite TV show.
Here we are at the Ellen studio in Hollywood.
And during that trip to Hollywood,
and he got to stand in Ellen's monologue spot.
It was a big deal for Philip Paulo's son.
And Jack's a huge Ellen fan. He's 14. He's a freshman. He's autistic.
And when he's not watching reruns of Ellen, he's doing well in school.
He has a high GPA. He was actually awarded an honor roll the day before the incident.
When did you first learn about what had happened?
We received a call from the assistant principal stating that our son has been pepper sprayed by APS.
According to this disciplinary action form obtained by Target 7, on February 16th at Rio Grande High School, Jack was yelling profanities on campus after his PE teacher instructed him to leave class. A teacher then called APS police.
Calm down, calm down. Hey, ever give him room?
The officer who filled out the form goes on to say that Jack claimed he wanted to kill and lunged at him. It was at that point he pepper sprayed Jack. Target 7 obtained body camera video from the officer involved in the incident, and it's unclear if either of those things happened.
Dude. Stay back. Get him. Let's go. I need to cuff him. Cuff him. Cuff him. I pepper sprayed him. Cuff him.
After Jack was pepper sprayed, the school was placed on lockdown.
Shelter in place to school.
BCSO showed up to the school and questioned the officer.
He came to attack me. At that point, when he came at me, that's when I pepper sprayed him.
As far as we could gather, Jackson never touched him or placed hands on anybody of the staff or the officer.
Target 7 has now learned from this email sent to parents at Rio Grande High School that the officer has been placed on leave Tuesday pending the outcome of an investigation. That's 11 days after the incident. Jack received a 3-day suspension more than a week after the incident, and after his parents had filed complaints with the school district and the sheriff's office.
He's struggling, he's processing every day.
Jack's parents are processing as well. Do you believe the school system failed your son?
Yes, I believe the school system definitely failed my son.
Paulo says that failure stems from Jack's individualized education program not being followed. Also known as an IEP, it outlines what the needs of a student are.
And according to his IEP, he's supposed to have a one-on-one aid, and he's supposed to be in a reduced class size. And being in PE, there's a large class size, and the one-on-one aid was not there that day to assist him in class.
Target 7 reached out to APS for an interview to ask about the situation and whether Jack's IEP wasn't followed. They declined to do one. However, the state's public education department told us that students should be getting the services outlined in their IEP. Do you think if the IEP was followed, Jackson would have been in that situation?
Jackson would definitely not be in the situation. His one-on-one aid would have been there to de-escalate any social behaviors that Jack was expressing during that period.
Paulo says he is seeking legal action, and he's filed a police report with the sheriff's office to investigate the officer for assault charges. For Target 7, I'm John Cardinelli.
In an email, Superintendent Scott Elder personally apologized for, quote, the trauma of the situation caused. For the complete email Elder sent to parents and students, head to KOAT.com.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry? I'm sorry? That's always a thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, sorry's a little too late. If we autistic students have an IEP every teacher, every school district has to follow, every teacher has to follow it by the letter and say, okay, reduce class size one-on-one. You have to follow that. And if it wasn't in PE, then everything from PE to this size. If you do not have, if teachers cannot follow the student, the special needs child's IEP, things are going to de-escalate out of control. Parents are going to wonder, hey, why isn't my child's IEP being followed? And yet, teachers are going to be sitting there with some excuse going, oh, we just don't care. Okay? That's crossing the line. And believe me, we autistic students need that. I was an autistic student, and I have an IEP plan. We had to sit there and say to ourselves, hey, this child has an IEP plan, we need to follow it. Not have them in a very large classroom. Start taking this very seriously. That's just the common sense here. And coming up, we're going to read to you that full email from that superintendent, and I'm going to raise some common sense. Stay with us. Now that we've heard the report, I'm going to read to you the full email. The full email. This was sent on Tuesday. This was February 27th. That was probably almost a week. So the 27th, that was 3 days ago, and the incident was almost 2 weeks ago. Listen, if you have an incident going on, you need to post an email the day of. Not the day after, not weeks, not months, the day after. Not gathering up the facts, not just gathering up the facts and then just saying, okay, we gotta send out an email. You need to email parents immediately. Let them know, hey, the school was on lockdown, this, and this. And not put yourself in a position to just wait a week. Here's the full email. This is from February 27th. Dear Rio Grande family, Rio Grande High School community, an Albuquerque Public Schools officer assigned to the Rio Grande High School campus is placed on leave pending the outcome of an investigation into the handling of a student restraining incident. The incident occurred on February 16th. The student in the main courtyard refused police orders to stop screaming at students and calm down. The student failed to comply. He was sprayed with mace and handcuffed. If the investigation determines the treatment of the student does not align with acceptable restraint practices, further action may be taken. School and district officers were actively working with the student's family. We were not at liberty to discuss the details of those conversations of the incident with anyone other than the student and his family. I want to personally apologize for the trauma and situation caused. The district's main focus is the safety and security of all students and staff. It is imperative we meet and support the emotional and physical needs of every student we serve. Scott Ender. And I believe the dad said his plan was not followed. If the plan wasn't followed, this incident would never have happened. But they never even followed the plan, so this raises common sense. It's okay. Do we have to go back to another autistic incident years ago? I believe we do. Remember years ago when remember another incident? This is one incident I remember where a teacher was placed in a rubber room after an autistic an incident with autism. Me and an autistic student. So I'm trying to Oh, there it is.
And to not be
This incident was over 10 years ago to where a teacher abused an autistic child. Now, hadn't she helped him out, we wouldn't be in this incident that we're in. Let's take a look.
to sit here and hear that, oh, this is an internal matter, I can't get my head around that. If I or anybody in here walked up and threw any of you out of a chair and started kicking you, you know how many phones would be up to somebody's ear calling the police? And they were talking about a 5-year-old autistic child, much less my child or anybody's child. It's just, I question whether any of you are qualified to sit up at this board. I remember some of you being here in the last 2 meetings I've been to. So this isn't just news. This didn't just pop out to you all here like it did to us. You've been knee deep in it. And just to look at you is just so difficult. I hear these flowery speeches and we're sorry. Well, sorry is a little late. And to not be angry is, it's not my child. I'm not angry for those people and those parents. I'm angry for everybody else. Hear stories about children being duct taped. Who the hell do you think you are? I think come election time, it needs to be not just Mr. Grant that goes, but that principal needs to leave.
Yep.
The assistant superintendent needs to leave, and you all need to be replaced. Maybe not, maybe what we need is less education, more common sense.
Yep.
Because common sense, it seems to me that teacher had been rubber roomed, would have been gone, this would have been out in the public, and it would have been handled properly, because what we're doing right now is bouncing off the wall. I've never seen so much anger out of people that I consider to be so tame and pacifistic. I've never seen anger. I'm looking at mothers that walk around and they want to rip their arms off. And it's just an abomination I see in front of me, and I can only say you're lucky it was not my child. You're fortunate it was not my child that was thrown to the ground and killed. So you need to really get it together, because I can guarantee the conversations I've had with people, election time comes up and we know everybody's name here. And you need to make it happen, because I just don't see you being here much longer.
Compare this, if you compare this to this story, it's really similar because both are autistic. It's an autistic incident. To where an autistic, but this pepper spray was not from a teacher. It was from an officer. Hadn't the officer realized he was special needs, he would have figured something out. And going back to the letter saying, I want to personally apologize for the trauma. What did I apologize for? You know, my mom always tells me, well, you should have thought about that, but you went ahead and did it. It's too late for I'm sorries. What there needs to be is retraining staff members and officers so that this incident will never happen, and be out thinking, okay, what do we do with this incident? So what do we do? So, I mean, you can't sit there and say to yourself, okay, what can we do so that way, listen, you cannot be just sitting here saying to yourself, okay, what can we do so that this does not happen again? If the teacher day wasn't here, this would never have happened. The parents need to be called in. Mom and dad have to be called in to de-escalate the situation. That way, the child can be calm. An incident like this would never have happened. Or you can just put the child in in-school suspension. Sometimes it's a large group in in-school suspension, sometimes it's a smaller group. That way he'd be more focused. Or take him out of the classroom, away from the incident. But he was outside the class, not farther away where the students can hear or see the incident. And I gotta tell you, this is one of the worst sources every year that I've covered. So, 3-day suspension, and they can file, and the parents file a complaint with the school district and the sheriff's office. And I think the school failed him, so if this was a lawsuit put in place, the evidence were put up right there, that would be grounds for a lawsuit. And then the school would sit there and say, hey, we tried to talk to him, we tried this and this, we followed his IEP, and parents would sit there and claim, well, you failed to follow up my son's IEP. Every school district needs a special education program. Every school district. We don't need, you put them in inclusion, put them in regular classes, you're asking for a disaster. This school district here in Flower Bluff has a great special education program. A great special ed program. To where they help them out. They have IEP plans. They have basic. I mean, we gotta get these programs out there. I mean, we can't. I mean, instances like this is why we have special ed programs. We need those programs. We have to expand those programs to every state instead of putting them in inclusion. If we put an autistic child in, you're asking them for a disaster. Parents will be up in arms and war, saying, "Hey, what's this autistic child doing in my child's classroom? This and this and this. Why is this and that and the other?" Remember Sean from Turning Point? Remember the story I talked about? Remember Sean's story, Lesson in Life? Well, they put him in an inclusion class when they should have focused in on putting him in basic classes. I mean, teachers ACB, there wasn't an IEP followed. That was before the IEP incident. If we don't have IEPs, everything's going to go out of control here, and worse is yet to come. And believe me, we've all been through worse. And I don't want to go through the worst, because the worst might not come. Alright, coming up, we're going to take you to the camps that happened in Texas during World War II. The Roundup. You'll see exclusive video footage, and you'll get a chance to witness what happened during those times. Stay with us. Now a story about cover-up and sweeping things under the carpet. You remember during World War II, there are these internment camps. These camps were put in place. It's a story about Germans, Japanese, and Italians who rounded up throughout the Central South America and used as pawns in the game of swapping them for American civilians, compounding them in Europe. It's a glimpse of what happened. So, as you're about to see, it took them from the U.S. to South America. Here's Lee Thompson.
For 50 years, a piece of history has been sealed away here in the stacks of the National Archives.
They made me take absolutely all my clothes off. The treatment there was pretty tough.
It's a secret so well kept, almost no one knew it was here until now.
Nothing justifies that. Nothing.
Deep in thousands of once classified files, Dateline has uncovered what might be one of the biggest kidnappings in recent history.
At times there were rumors that they had killed everyone, and we would get more and more worried.
The victims were thousands of civilians in Latin America. Men, women, children, even grandparents, taken from their countries, often at gunpoint, and held captive. You might think this was the work of terrorists, but this plan was hatched and quietly carried out by our own U.S. government. They were kidnapped when the world was at war.
December 7, 1941.
From the flash of bombs over Pearl Harbor to the constant advance of the enemy in Europe, fear gripped the nation.
Well, I was managing my farm, my coffee farm.
For Hugo Draghi, then a young German immigrant, News of World War traveled slowly to his farm in the highlands of Guatemala. He came here seeking a better life. He found it and married, and for 20 years he lived quietly, a world away from Germany. Then one night, a knock at the door shattered his quiet life.
Habían 6 policías.
There were 6 police, Guatemalan, and they took me on foot. I think it was something like 12 miles on foot.
Police dragged Draghi into the night at gunpoint and marched him down a rural road, never telling him where or why he was being taken. Draghi says at the time he was painfully ill with malaria and struggled with each step.
I didn't feel anything because I was so sick. So then we went into the jail in Guatemala City for a while.
It was then Guatemalan police turned him over to American soldiers. The Americans never charged him with a crime, never gave him a hearing. He never had a trial.
And I wanted to say to my wife certain things. German was forbidden. Okay. So we say goodbye, but we embraced for a little while.
He said to me, stay here in Guatemala. No, te vas en otra parte. You have to defend the finca.
Defend the finca, he told her. Save the farm. Pregnant with a third child, Oda Draghi would not see her husband again for 5 years. Our Dateline investigation found Hugo Draghi was only one among thousands of civilians forced from their homes in an extraordinary roundup. The man in charge, U.S. Army Chief of Staff General George Marshall, who would later be known as the author of the Marshall Plan. Under Marshall's direction, families from 12 Latin American countries, scared and uncertain, were tagged like baggage and taken away as pawns in a political war game.
And then they said that they were going to take us on a boat.
Draghi says the soldiers strip-searched him 6 times, holding him in darkness below ship's deck for what became a month-long voyage to the United States.
Couldn't see day or night. And 6 days later, suddenly, they allowed us to go outside for a while. Just a half hour to see daylight. We were always locked up as if we were bandits. And we no longer spoke among ourselves. Oh my God.
Dateline sorted through hundreds of government files, some declassified for us for the first time. What we found is shocking. With computer analysis, we discovered at least 2,800 Latin American Germans taken into U.S. custody during the war. An estimated 2,200 Japanese, most from Peru, unknown numbers of Italians, and a half dozen other nationalities. In all, our investigation found the U.S. government seized more than 5,000 civilians from a dozen Central and South American countries, all part of a secret plan that would only become clear later.
This is the railroad track, and they unloaded them, and they marched them down the railroad track.
In the small town of Kennedy, Texas, Gracie Franklin watched the prisoners arrive from her aunt's front porch.
The man in the tower had a gun, and the man on the horseback was riding around with a gun.
Did it look like a prison?
Yes, it did look like a prison.
While she was just across the street from Camp Kennedy, Gracie Franklin says she knew nothing about those held inside, people the Justice Department called dangerous enemy aliens.
It was very hush-hush. They really didn't tell us a whole lot about it.
But we know now the government set up Camp Kennedy and 24 others like it in 1942 in a quiet agreement with Latin American countries. The idea was to preserve the integrity and solidarity of the American continent from subversive activities. It meant rounding up anyone who might be a military threat. But how many of those taken by the U.S. were really spies? Dateline found the government had evidence against just a handful, some 140 cases out of more than 5,000 people kidnapped.
They brought in people from Latin America who hadn't been out of the hills for 30 years. They wanted to know, well, how's the Kaiser doing? And the Kaiser hadn't been around for 30 years when they got here.
Art Jacobs went back with us to Crystal City, Texas, to show us the camp where he and the kidnapped Latin Americans were once locked up.
Here is a party of women and children arriving in Crystal City.
At its peak, Crystal City alone held more than 3,000 people in small huts and duplexes without bathrooms or kitchens.
The fence, the loss of freedom.
At 12 years old, a young Art Jacobs from Brooklyn, New York, found himself at Crystal City. The government shipped him and his German-born parents there, along with hundreds of other families rounded up in the United States. But even then, he wondered how Latin Americans, most who didn't even speak English, ended up behind a fence in Texas.
Right here.
After years of research, Jacobs thinks he knows why.
They were kidnapped. They were literally kidnapped and brought into this country.
In fact, Department of Justice records obtained by Dateline show that, incredibly, the government knew all along most of the Latin Americans were innocent civilians. The Alien Enemy Control Unit, wrote one Justice Department official, has little information concerning aliens who were brought to the United States from Latin America.
Did anyone ever say that you had committed treason?
No. No, never. They did not ask. Not did I do it either.
Kishiro Hayashi had lived in Peru for 9 years before the war. He married a native Peruvian, his wife Teresa, and he told us he had nothing to do with politics, the war, or Japan.
Were you charged with anything?
Nada. No, nothing. There was no accusation.
And Dateline found nothing in U.S. government files naming Hayashi as a suspected spy or traitor. So why then were he and others like him rounded up at all? Dateline discovered it was all part of an incredible and elaborate secret plan carried out by General George Marshall. 6 days into the roundup, an order sent in secret code spelled out his plan. These interned nationals, ordered Marshall, are to be used for exchange with interned American civilian nationals. In other words, kidnapped Latin Americans were to be traded for hundreds of American tourists and businessmen trapped behind enemy lines. Did Marshall believe that was the only way to get Americans back from Nazi Germany and Japan? The answer may still be locked away in hundreds of classified files. But Dateline did find this rare film of those Latin Americans about to be traded. They were tagged and loaded on board ships like the SS Gripsholm, always under the watch of armed soldiers. There were 2 exchanges with Japan, 6 with Nazi Germany. Nearly half of those taken from Latin America, some 2,300 civilians, were placed on exchange ships. Not everyone went willingly. We found Hugo Dragi's name on a list of people who begged not to be sent to Germany.
When you told them you didn't want to go back, what did they say?
He said otherwise you will go tied up. Well, so you have to go.
1 month later, Draghi says, armed American soldiers forced him on the boat and shipped him to Germany. It was 1944, the height of the Allied bombing.
Those 5 years, a lot happened to me. Every day was a lot. Bombs coming from above.
Others like Draghi suffered the same fate. Dateline compared just that one list he was on with passenger lists from exchange ships and found more than a half dozen others sent to Germany against their will. Most frightening is that among the innocent civilians seized from the streets of Central and South America, among those very people the U.S. held captive, were at least some German Jews.
If all of this was about exchanges, is it possible that some Jews were sent back to Germany?
Yes, it's not only possible, but it's highly plausible that they were.
In fact, among those sent back to Germany, we found names like Rosenbaum, Feldman, Rosenthal, Stein, Goldman, and Eisenberg. Were some of them Jews? Could any of them been sent to their deaths? 50 years later, we don't know.
Is this a deep, dark secret of this country?
I think so. I think it's deeper and darker than many of us would like to believe.
Perhaps that's because at least some in our government found the entire operation embarrassing. Buried deep in the U.S. archives, Dateline uncovered this State Department memo dated 1943. It says, "I think it is undesirable for the written record to show that the initiative for the roundup came from us." The memo was never signed.
And to think that we would try to kidnap people from Latin America, bring them up here, and then cover it up. I mean, either you had a cause or you didn't have a cause.
In that same memo, it also says, show that the deporting government had requested our collaboration.
Well, that does it right there. That ought to be proof enough for the President of the United States and Congress to say, look, we need to investigate this and clear all this up.
You might wonder why these Latin American countries cooperated and turned their own people over to the U.S. Hugo Draghi says he knows why.
When at the end of those 5 years I returned, we had nothing. We had nothing to live on. They had taken everything away. All our property, everything.
Countries throughout Latin America profited the same way, seizing farms and businesses from those they turned over to the United States. Some people have likened this to kidnapping.
I'm sure it feels like that.
10 years ago, Angus Macbeth was chief counsel to a presidential commission which won a formal apology and $20,000 for each Japanese American relocated during the war. But the commission never fully studied what happened to Latin Americans and never found what Dateline found. So there's been no apology to Kishiro Hayashi, Hugo Draghi, or thousands of others.
It wasn't directly in what the Congress asked us to do.
Does the United States owe these people?
A strong argument can be made for that. But I think it's the kind of thing that deserves a very close look by the government.
Is for the government to say, we screwed up. We made a mistake. We shouldn't have done this. And we need to tell the truth so it doesn't happen again.
As of now, there is no organized effort among victims of the program to seek compensation from the U.S. government. But now that the story's out, that could change. In the meantime, the law that allows the U.S. government the right to hold any alien born of an enemy nationality is still in the books. It was passed.
Followed by the finale of
Where is in this one? Alright. We're gonna take a break. Back in a moment. Employees fired because of autism. It's always reported in the news. But when companies get sued by parents and by lawyers, when it just really hits you that things have got to change. I could tell you this for myself. I'm an autistic employee where I work at, and I've never been fired for my disability. If you never heard of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, this ain't the first rodeo for everyone. Every manager has to follow that law to the letter. To that letter. Let's look at a few stories to where where employees were fired because of disabilities. Were they sued or weren't they sued? Does need to be common sense raised? Let's look at this one. This family talks about firing a young man with intelligent disabilities.
Welcome back. You may have seen on social media an Omaha Hy-Vee store fired a young man with intellectual disabilities.
6 News is on your side looking into what happened. His family spoke exclusively with our Bella Caracta.
Anthony Richard worked at the 96th and Q Hy-Vee for the past 5 years.
It's sad for him. It was his job. It was his life. Everybody knows he loved it. And what they've done is rotten.
2 weeks ago, Anthony's mother, Sue, was ready to drive him to the store a few miles away. But to her surprise, he wasn't dressed for work when he walked down the stairs.
And I said, what happened? He said, they say no, come back.
His family says a manager accused him of stealing a can of coffee and turned him into HR. Anthony says it was an open pack of canned coffee. Unsellable items near the break room signal they're free for the taking among employees, he says.
They don't mean the same. Yeah.
Would you be able to tell me what that says and what it means? In what the family believes was an unjust termination, they've complained up the corporate ladder, reaching the Hy-Vee president. They say they were told initially this isn't Anthony's first instance of stealing, but when they asked for proof,
They didn't have any documentation of anything in the past. They don't have write-ups. They have nothing on him.
Anthony finished his shift that day he was fired, but never got closure with his co-workers.
Then I said goodbye.
6 News reached out to Hy-Vee. Quote, "We've been talking with Anthony's family to remedy this situation, and we have offered him his position back. At Hy-Vee, we continue to be committed to hiring, retaining, and supporting people with disabilities." Unquote.
Anthony, would you want to go back there?
No.
For now, he and his mother are taking a fishing trip to decompress from this situation. On your side, in Omaha, Bella Caracta, 6 News.
Anthony's mother says she hopes moving forward that those with disabilities are treated with fairness in the workplace.
In just a few minutes, I'm going to explain you some common sense. Second story now. This happened in Miami years ago, where a McDonald's employee, where a McDonald's in Florida was facing a lawsuit after allegedly firing a man for shaky hands. But the company says, not so fast. That's a false allegation. It was because of something else. Take a look.
For the first time in forever, I felt like I was happy.
Alex Martinez, who has mild autism, says the joy of his first job turned to bitter disappointment when this North Miami McDonald's fired him because of shaky hands.
When I heard that I was fired, I feel like all hope was lost. It's like, I don't get why they do this to us. It's like we can't even just express of how we really truly feel.
Alex demonstrated how his hands sometimes shake, and he says during a shift he was told to go home. His grandmother, who works at the same location, says she got a call from a supervisor who told her Alex was fired.
People emotional too much, nervous, and you know, so
For his ability. He's not qualified for the job.
His sister took to Twitter, and the post, which reads in part, "My brother was fired. His hands get shaky when he gets a little too anxious," went viral.
I didn't even know it would get this big. And it turned from just being about my brother to being about everyone.
An attorney saw it and has filed a lawsuit for the family with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
He was terminated because of his disability, which is unlawful.
This McDonald's is owned by Anthony Greenwood Sr., who runs several locations along with his son. Greenwood Sr. issued a statement firing back, which reads in part, "Treating all people with respect is a top priority, and we have a long-standing history of hiring and accommodating employees with disabilities. Importantly, we did not terminate Mr. Martinez, although to date he has been a no-show for his 2 scheduled shifts. We are continuing to look into this matter and ask for your patience while we try to further understand the situation at hand."
What's there to understand? They were the ones in the wrong here. If it was false allegations, prove it to them. I mean, I'm not blaming the victims here. The victims did the right thing. Post on social media, hiring her this and this and this. I mean, if the owner were to sit there and say, "We fucked up, we're sorry," no. The "I'm sorry" part should never be in that sentence. When you say "I'm sorry" to somebody, they don't. You really don't. If you're gonna say "I'm sorry," you really need to truly mean it. Like if you sit there and say, "Hey, I'm sorry," and then like one day you say, "Hey, I'm sorry," won't happen again. Next day, yeah, it's gonna happen again. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. It's like this. If you are going to hire somebody who has autism or special needs, you need to back up the facts, do some research, or I'll explain common sense in just a minute. Here's the third story. This happened in Lancaster. He was fired because he claims he was fired from a convenience store because he had autism. Did they cross the line? See for yourself.
Investigation now fired for having autism. That's what one local man says happened to him.
The I-Team's Lauren Lemanchek looks into autism in the workplace
and a gray area in the law that may leave some workers vulnerable.
This is the employment application?
Yes.
Blaine Gagne was determined to get off disability and get a full-time job. Because he's on the autism spectrum, he knew it wouldn't be easy.
Being able to make eye contact with people, greeting people, doesn't come as easy for me as somebody else and who doesn't have autism.
Things he says he told a manager at a local convenience store chain when he was hired.
They just brushed it off, said, hey, it's not going to be a problem.
But then came a bad review from a secret shopper. Customer was not greeted when entering the store, and suggestions that Blaine should remain professional and smile when taking care of customers. After 2 months, Blaine was fired.
Do you feel like you were discriminated against?
Yes.
Blaine's story illustrates a common conundrum for others on the spectrum. Autism is a legally protected disability, but that doesn't mean discrimination doesn't still happen.
It's constant, and it's not a problem we've figured out how to solve.
At the Asperger Autism Network in Watertown, they work to help people with autism find jobs. But experts estimate the unemployment and underemployment rate for autistic people is 80%.
And it's a huge untapped resource.
Todd Garvin, now working on a master's degree in social work, says he experienced subtle discrimination for years.
Very often my assignments will be cut short.
The person has to be able to perform the essential functions of the job in order to be entitled to have a reasonable accommodation. And so the issue is what's essential.
Employment attorney Patty Washinko says for people with developmental and psychological disorders, the accommodations aren't as obvious. In Blaine's case, for instance, she might argue that making eye contact and greeting customers warmly isn't essential for a convenience store clerk.
It can be a gray area, and that's one of the other reasons it can be really tough.
But that's subjective. For Blaine, the process is frustrating. He's worked part-time at Dunkin' Donuts for 2 years, but he says despite the setback, he will keep searching for a full-time job.
I'm trying to be independent for myself.
Blaine filed a complaint with the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. Last year, more than 600 people filed disability-related discrimination claims. For the I-Team, Lauren Lemanchek, WBZ News.
All right, we got time for a couple. We have time for a couple more. Badger being denied employment because of your autism. Take a look at this story.
A story that will warm your heart this Thanksgiving week.
Now, when a local Special Olympic athlete was repeatedly denied employment, he decided to take charge of his own destiny by opening up a coffee shop.
What transpired since then hasn't just impacted him, but each and every customer who walks through his door.
Actually, we're going to save that for a future show. On a future show, we're going to save that.
At 5, outrage tonight over the firing of a longtime local Wendy's employee who has special needs. He was with the company for the better part of 2 decades. Good evening, I'm Brian Blakely.
And I'm Alicia Barnes. Queen City News anchor Robin Kennedy is live tonight at the Wendy's in Stanley and Gaston County. Now, Robin, you spoke with the sister of the man who was fired. So how did she even find out about this?
Yeah, Alicia and Brian, it is such an upsetting story. The sister of the man with special needs says her brother's caretaker called the restaurant here to let them know that he was on his way to work. But that's when the sister says the manager told the caretaker he was fired. Kona Turner takes care of her brother, Dennis Peak.
Well, he is my baby brother, and I got guardianship of him when our mom passed. Well, and he's like my kid, you know, he's mine now.
Until Wednesday, Dennis was a proud employee of more than 20 years at the Wendy's on Highway 27 in Stanley.
I love my job, really. I work here, no time.
Dennis washed tables and chairs. His family liked to stop in and see him at the restaurant. But without warning Wednesday, Kona found out her brother had been fired from his job.
She just terminated him. She said she had a job that needed to be done and he wasn't doing it.
Kona says she tried to talk with the manager, but couldn't get anywhere with her.
I was very upset. I was very upset.
Kona posted about the ordeal on Facebook.
It just melted my heart. I'm sorry.
The owners of the franchise tell Queen City News in part, quote, "We are committed to creating a welcoming and inclusive environment for our employees and our customers. This was an unfortunate mistake and lapse in protocol." Wendy's offered Dennis his job back. Kona doesn't know if they'll accept.
I will not let anybody mistreat my brother. I will not let them be mean to him.
Now, Kona says there should be consequences for mistreating workers. I specifically asked Wendy's corporate if the manager who fired Dennis is being disciplined. They said they cannot comment on personnel matters, but they do tell me they're taking appropriate action. Reporting live in Stanley, Robin Kennedy, Queen City News.
What appropriate action do you mean? If you're gonna, that's crossing the line here. If you're firing an employee who has special needs or autism, you cross the line. If you do not know how to manage an autistic employee or a person with Down syndrome, you need to find some help or have a role compass put in place.
Right now at 4, a North Carolina family wants answers after their loved one was fired from a job he's been doing for more than 20 years. We're talking about Dennis Peak. He has Down syndrome and was planning to retire soon from a Wendy's restaurant in Gaston County. But his family said a store manager fired him because, quote, he wasn't able to do his job like a normal person. His family is now advocating for him after they found out he was fired without receiving notice.
I'm out here because I need to be his voice for the way he was treated. He don't understand. And we can't tell him he was terminated. We have not told him, and we won't tell him.
Okay, that was Dennis's sister, Kona. She says she simply does not know what to do now. She took her heartbreak and frustration to Facebook, and word spread fast. Thursday morning, she said she received a call from Carolina Restaurant Group. That's the company that owns and operates that Wendy's, saying Pete could be reinstated next week. However, his family is now torn between letting him go back to the job next week because they're concerned about how he's going to be treated.
Okay. When we return, one last story and some common sense. Stay with us. If there's somebody out there that wants to know the truth about autistic employees and the workplace, Orion Kelly can tell you.
Employers can get bogged down in a misinterpretation that autistic people aren't a good fit for the workplace because they make the neurotypicals feel uncomfortable. But in reality, autistic people are simply open about our feelings, our intentions, our thoughts, whereas neurotypical employees may in fact tell you what you want to hear, may in fact omit or lie based on avoiding the repercussions, be that the social repercussions in the workplace or the professional repercussions. I reckon increased productivity is a really great attribute of an autistic employee. But you should also mix into that the idea that we actually enjoy doing our job. And as a result of that, we don't crave, need, or even acknowledge there's some sort of want or need to socialise in the workplace, to chit-chat, to stop, to take 700 breaks. But in the broader context, it's not something that occurs to us often or makes us feel good in any way. If we are passionate about what we're doing, if we're focused on what we're doing, we're going to be more productive as employees. So employers can get bogged down in a misinterpretation that autistic people
But there's
aren't a good
proof
fit
out
for
there
the
that
workplace
autistic people make great employees. But
autistic.
We're gonna save that for the future. We're gonna save that for our next episode. We're gonna save that for our next Give Me a Break. But there needs to be some moral compass and common sense put in place. That brings us to our common sense alert. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna play you for this common sense alert. I'm gonna play you a portion from a Daily Report. I think I showed you about military murder. This happened after the war, to where The men who came home from the military murdered their wives. Here's a portion.
Just last month, the Army started a new program designed to ease the transition to life back home. Instead of going straight back to their families, soldiers returning from Iraq or Afghanistan are now required to remain on duty for 4 or 5 days and be counseled on how to reconnect with their spouses and children. The program is mandatory.
There needs to be similarities to this. That program for the military, there needs to be a counseling program called, which if I were to create that program, it would be probably a first for everybody. For every employee who has autism. I mean, it wouldn't be for the autistic employees because the autistic employees are the victims. It'd be for managers and employees and crew leaders from each section. One section from, it'd be, this program, if I were to create this one section would be managers, one section would be assistant managers, the other section would be crew leaders, and the other section would be employees. Well, not employees, specifically. For regular employees. It needs to be mandatory for just managers and assistant managers. Because if you do not know how to manage an autistic employee, you need to have prior knowledge or do some research beforehand. Or, in this program that I were to create, it'd be called Autism First. A program to where managers and assistant managers would be counseled on how to manage employees with autism. Let me play you now another portion from that 60 Minutes story that we talked about, where Denny's was racist. There we go.
Welcome to the Weekend 2 workshop. Good, thank you. Welcome to the Weekend 2 workshop.
Karen Reagan and Andre Clark are training these 17 Denny's managers on how to avoid offending minority customers.
Do not touch them, do not follow them out of the building. Do not use profanity or racial slurs, and do not question somebody's immigration status.
That's what needs to be put in place. Instead of the Weekend 2 workshop, it'd be Autism First. A program for managers, for GMs, assistant managers, new managers in training. If you're a manager in training, you gotta complete the program. It would be a 4 to 5 day program, or extended depending on if you show up or not. It could be a 4 to 5 day program or a Saturday program. If you don't go to this program, you're not automatically promoted to be a manager. If they ask you, have you completed this program? Because it's a mandatory program put in place. Don't go to the program, you're not promoted to manager. I mean, the main people you all may sit there and comment saying, yeah, this is a great idea for all managers. I'm a manager myself, and I think that program should be put in place. Other people may sit there inside me saying, nope, we don't need this program because I have an autistic child, this, and that, and the other, and I know how to respect autistic employees. Well, the common ground that for managers who have been here, new managers need to go to this program, current managers need to be going to this program, it's mandatory. You don't go, reduced hours, disciplinary action can be put in place, or termination. That's what needs to happen here. And if you don't go, again, this program, I create this program, no one goes, then Termination could happen. And you may either deal with it or not deal with it, but managers need to put autism first. Special needs come first. And a lot of people, y'all may sit there and say, whoa, hold on a minute here. Autism should never come first. There needs to be a line being drawn. Draw the line. If you draw the line, you don't cross the line. Live by a code. Managers need to live by a code saying, I will not fire people who are autism, pregnant, or any person who has special needs. I will only fire if they've broken rules. You cross the line, you're done. The moral compass here is this. Get your act together. Get it together here. As an autistic employee from where I work at, which I won't explain, I will not name names, because I don't want them getting to my high ground saying, hey, you act up, you talked about us, we're firing you. I don't even gonna say anything. But if I were to create this program, it'd be a first. Because we really need to train managers, current managers, new managers, GM, assistant managers, current managers, new managers. You don't complete the program, you're not going to, then you won't qualify. Until, it's getting continuous until they sit there and say, hey, until someone says, hey, just go to the program and listen, just take notes. A 4 to 5 day program. Just go to the program. Companies can be saying, yeah, that's a great idea. Other companies may sit there and say, no, this is not a good idea because this and this. Take a page out of Denny's. If you take a page from Denny's, maybe then you too can put autism back on the map. And retrain employees on how to deal with employees with autistic behavior, special needs behavior. We'll be right back. It's not uncommon I do a viral break with double digits. 15 views from this video. If you remember years ago, we talked about no pass, no play. On Throwback Thursday and our Back to School month, we focused on no pass, no play. If you don't know what no pass, no play is, basically if you fail your classes with a 60 or below, if you don't pass your class with 70 or above, you don't get to participate in your extracurricular activities. That goes for all sports. You have to have a 70 or higher in order to still compete. But as Dale Hansen will tell you, the sports director, he's going to be out of his soapbox. With 15 views, take a look.
Play is back in the news again. Coaches appear to be finally getting their way, and we're telling our kids again education runs a distant second to athletics in this state. State senators in Austin say the state's requirement of at least a 70 in the classroom is too much, 6 weeks with no games is too long, and those of us who support no pass, no play have set our education standards too high. The arguments to repeal the law or even soften the law are incredibly stupid arguments. One senator says if our kids can't play games because they can't pass, they join gangs and drop out of school. There's no evidence of that. The dropout rate is actually lower now than it was 10 years ago when no pass, no play started in Texas. Dallas Khan Academy counselors who work with more than 700 dropouts a year see another 1,000 or so, say they don't see any who dropped out because they can't play football. Coaches and state senators tell us that if we deprive these kids of their games, we deprive them of the discipline, the support, the character we instill through sports. I'd like to know what those coaches say to the kids who try out for basketball every year but are cut from the team because they're too short or too slow. Several area school districts confirming for us they do that every year. What about those kids? If you're 6'4" and can slam dunk a basketball, we care a great deal about you. If you're 5'4", go join a gang. Drop out if you want, because we will deprive you of the discipline, the support, and the character we instill through sports. It disgusts me that we're arguing in 95 what we decided in 85. Coaches then, who would never accept a 65 on the football field, think we should in the classroom. If your kid runs the right play 85% of the time for any football team in Texas, he won't play football in Texas. We have the best high school football in America because we demand it, because we expect it, and because we set our standards very high. I don't understand why so many people are afraid to demand and expect the same in the classroom. Since those of us who do won that argument 10 years ago, grades have gone up. The passing requirement was 60 back then, and kids were failing with 58s and 59s. Now the passing requirement is 70, and our kids are failing with 68s and 69s. If we raise the passing requirement to 80, we'd have kids failing with 78s and 79s. Too many kids will do just enough to get by and then sometimes fail. I know that because I was one of those kids. I failed every class I took my sophomore year to show my friends just how tough I was. My basketball coach was tougher. After sitting out 9 weeks, Gene Evans didn't let me play the next 9 weeks either. Says I should have been there in October when he needed me. My junior year, I had to have C's, mid-80s in Iowa back then, or I didn't play again. I'm here now because of Gene Evans, a teacher, Frank Weiland, and my dad. Too many kids don't have a dad, don't have Frank Weiland, and there's not enough coaches like Gene Evans either. If your kid, your student, or your player thinks his or her self-worth is determined by the games they play, if a high school education is only necessary to play, you've already failed that kid. Our senators say a first-time offender should receive a 3-week penalty, but only once. That thinking amazes me. We can't keep a kid out of sports 6 weeks for failing in the classroom because they'll join a gang. 3 weeks is enough. But fail a second time, and now it's time to join a gang because we're getting tough on you now. Sounds like the criminal justice system to me. Probation for a first-time offender, early parole for the rest, and we all know how much we appreciate the work our judges in prisons are doing to control crime in America. Why do we want our schools to follow that system? This isn't a Channel 8 opinion, it's mine, and I would like to hear yours. You can write me here at Channel 8, and I will write or call back. I'll talk to you anytime about our kids' education and athletics because I think our schools, our coaches, and our kids can do even better.
So moral compass here is this. Education always pops up. In the states growing up, no pass, no play. If you don't believe me, then hear from Shaquille O'Neal. Hear from 2 more people. Hear from Shaquille.
Gonna pass, you're not gonna play.
And then once I started learning to become a leader, education would always pop up. What I mean by that, in the States growing up, no pass, no play. So one time in the championship game, I didn't pass, my team lost, and all my boys were mad at me. I let my boys down. We were like 15-0, we had 1 game left against our rivals, and we were waiting for this game, but I didn't play, they blew us out. And we had to hear that the next day in school. So I had to, concentrate on education.
Look, if you're not gonna pass, you're not.
And then there was this person right here. He failed with the 60.
I had failed history. I failed it with the 67. My coach at the time was going to allow me to. I don't know how he was going to swing that, but he was going to allow me to play. And my dad was like, no. He literally went up to the school and talked to the coach and made me empty my locker and take out the pads and give it back to, like my dad did that. If he doesn't pass, he's not playing. So that's how the way my dad, I had failed.
But Texas, the only state has the laws, and school districts in different states have policies. Every state needs a law saying no pass, no play. You don't have that law, then the kids join gangs. Dropping rates are going to plunge. That's common sense. Write to your state senators. Tell them there needs to be a no pass, no play law in your state. This is the only state that decriminalizes truancy and has no pass, no play. Just write to your senators. That's Game Break for this Wednesday going to Thursday. We'll see you again for Throwback Thursday with more Stupid in America. Good night.